Hi, I'm Susan Mackay, and I head up a team on demand generation, communities and gender at the GAVI Secretariat based in Geneva. And I've been working in and around immunization for the past 20 or so years. And I'd love to share some reflections with you today about the challenges that we're facing in the time of COVID. I really like this quote because I think it captures it really well. I think it's the combination of factors that we're seeing, misinformation on social media, decreased trust in institutions, and also weaknesses in the health system mean that although the majority of people are still very positive about vaccines, we are seeing significant hesitancy among certain groups. Communication is going to be critical, not only for routine, but also as we get ready to introduce at very rapid speed a COVID-19 vaccine, not just one vaccine, but potentially multiple different vaccines very rapidly produced. And it goes further than communication. What we need is a comprehensive and very behaviorally driven strategy for vaccine uptake and demand. We're way beyond the era of sort of posters and t-shirts and IEC materials. Since the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic, it's really been, as you know, this tsunami of misinformation, conspiracy theories, and really, I think we're all surprised suddenly in the immunization world to really be front and center in a global conversation. I really like this Neil Johnson study that was published in Nature. And I think this really dramatic visualization of the kind of competition between, the blue dots there are all the pro-vaccine people like us who are putting out very positive information on vaccines. But when you look at this visual mapping, you see that it's actually the red dots, the sea of red dots, which are much smaller in size, but yet are connecting much more powerfully with those who are kind of undecided or in the neutral space. And I think this really shows the level of threat in a very visual and tangible way. This report from the Campaign Against Digital Hate is really powerful read, and it really gets to sort of dig down into the very murky world of the anti-vax groups, and really tackles that question that it's not enough for us simply to be passive about this. There is a need for much more of a policy look at a crackdown. And I think this startling figure that the monetization of vaccine misinformation is estimated to be worth up to $1 billion a year. It's a very, very powerful dynamic that we're up against. And of course, we're seeing in all countries this sort of underlying erosion of trust, that people don't naturally nowadays trust authority and power. And this is really having a very sort of shaky foundation to the kind of national immunization program communication. If you don't trust an authority, it does make it much more difficult to trust in public health. And this is not just one country, we're seeing it in many countries around the world. This poll, I think many of you will have heard of this poll. It got quite a lot of pickup in the media, saying that whilst 3 out of 4 adults were saying when polled that they would accept a vaccine, but of course that points to the fact that nearly a quarter are already saying that they would not. They were skeptical about availability. Of course, it's a very complex process, but certainly in this poll, they did speak to the fact that fear of side effects is an issue. But this is a really important poll because it gives us some kind of breakdown across countries. This is another poll that's showing the shift and what this shift is showing and the polarization of opinion around a potential COVID vaccine as it got caught up in the wave of communication around the presidential election, of course, which is still not quite decided yet. And so we're in a very unstable world. But I think what I want to also say, this kind of polling that we almost every single day that we see, how much does it translate into actual intention and behavior? And we would say that this is this is really just it's a poll at a point in time. And what really concerns us is in the swirling mists of the infodemic is that how much the communication of polls like this is actually contributing to the noise and could even be influencing the way people think about the conversation. So it's a pretty big worry. And the worry about uptake is real. And I think this points to the situation in the pandemic in France, where there's an underlying undercurrent. There's been a long-running lack of trust in vaccines in France. And what happened when they bought 94 million doses of vaccine, but due to hesitancy, only 6 million were actually used. And so France was forced to sell on its vaccine. So it's a very real fear. But of course, for those that do want a COVID-19 vaccine, our biggest challenge is going to be that we're going to have very short supply in the early days. And the whole question around equity is at the heart of it. Who needs to get this vaccine first? Which groups, which countries? And of course, the work to set up the COVAX facility to try and introduce a kind of fair way of sharing out vaccine doses, not just between countries, rich and poor, but trying to make sure those at highest risk, including frontline workers and high-risk populations, receive them first. This has never been attempted in the history of the world. So it's a pretty big story out there. Of course, what we're working in the immunization world, what we're really scared about is that a rapidly developed vaccine could have significant risks of adverse reactions, and particularly something going to be rolled out at unprecedented scale. So this is a major concern. Research on existing routine immunization, this is data from the Wellcome Trust Monitor and the London School Vaccine Confidence Project, but certainly seeing a very strong correlation between those that believe in the safety of vaccines relates very strongly to how positively they feel about their frontline health workers. And that really points us to such an important constituency, not least in COVID-19 vaccines, where they will certainly be very ahead in the queue of getting the vaccine themselves. So we do have an approach that's been put together by all the immunization partners, and very much looking to an integrated and very much data-driven approach, and starts at the top of that first circle of understanding the social and behavioral drivers to immunization, undertaking systematic social listening and engagement, engaging frontline health workers as early adopters and change agents, and implementing behaviorally informed risk and crisis communications at scale. And this last one, very much investing in engaging communities and building trust through influencers of all kinds. And going into that in more detail, we have been concerned for many years about the lack of systems to collect demand side data systematically. It's been a major challenge. And in 2018, WHO set up a global expert group that's been looking at this and measuring the behavioral social drivers of vaccination, and those tools are ready to go to the field. And COVID-19 pandemic could actually help us speed that process up. And it's worth looking and understanding what we call the BES model. And it really combines this idea of perceptions of what people think and feel, combining that with data on the social processes around recommendations and community support, etc. Putting that through the lens of motivation and intention to get the vaccine, but also looking very much at the practical factors: how easy, how affordable are the quality services, a respect from provider, and coming out with that is all required in order to have a successfully vaccinated child. But of course, we've now adapted these tools for the adult paradigm of the all-age COVID vaccines. That second step, the making sure that the systematic use and understanding of data, and that's very much something that you're looking at in this course and very central to your way forward, but it's critical for immunization. And this point about providing health workers with the right knowledge, the right skills to accept the vaccine, And this is going to be a major task to roll this out worldwide and make sure that all frontline health workers are equipped. Listening to our audiences and making sure that we can understand the behavioral and social drivers, and making sure that our interventions are going to suit them. And of course, for immunization people working for generations on childhood immunization, going to an adult vaccination at scale globally is going to be a challenge and goes way beyond the current uptake and access to influenza vaccine. And this last point, particularly because of elderly, vulnerable populations, it's really causing us to reach out and actually engage influencers and community groups and CSOs who are working with populations, high risk, elderly, and those with underlying conditions. That's a really important point around vaccine safety net, this network that WHO set up some 2 decades ago to really provide credible, accessible, trusted information and a means of getting it. So that I encourage you, if you haven't been there, please go and visit this site. Just want to finish off with basically a bit of a plea. What can you do to help us? I think the first point here, please learn everything you can about immunization and vaccines. It's really important that anyone working on the infodemic side is really up to speed on these. Very complicated issues, some of them. The second point I'd like to make is that please make sure that you understand how the country that you're supporting or working in is rolling out the COVID-19 vaccine, and also any other issues around other immunization and immunization perhaps from measles or emergency campaigns. But make sure that you're aware of what barriers might be, but what the opportunities in your role could be to help these efforts. And so part of that will be doing a little bit of desk research and finding out if there are any recent history of problems relating to anti-vax misinformation or disinformation, or adverse events that may have caused a loss of trust. And make sure that you're in touch with the right experts. And sometimes you just need to make those connections and find out who are the trusted people that can talk on this issue, from a whole range, from the pediatricians to vaccine safety experts to credible influencers in the community. I do urge you to build on what already exists. I would say please connect to your immunization colleagues and build on what they already know and are already doing. But I think you, in your unicorn role, you can really help be that facilitator, that person that helps break down the silos that we do see in countries. So that's perhaps one of the most transformational things you can do in your role. And just really at the end here, so you can do quite a bit to do a bit of an assessment, to find out where the gaps are and be that bridge to the solution. Thank you.